Morning. I was the live was not happen and I started to thought. So I had to erase this highlights. Okay, now welcome. Let me check once again. It is proper. Okay, I think it is proper. Okay, now let's start. Welcome to second chapter of this series, sexual reproduction in flowering plant. Are we not lucky that plant reproduce sexually? The merits of flowers that we enjoy gazing at, the scents, the perfumes that we soon over, the rich colors that attracts us, are all the and as aid to sexual reproduction. Flowers do not exist only for us to be used for our own selfishness. All flowering plants show sexual reproduction. I looked at the diversity of the structures of the inflorescence, flower, and the floral parts. Shows an amazing range of adaptation to ensure formation of the end products of sexual reproduction, the fruits and the seeds. In this chapter, let us understand the morphology, a structure, and the process of sexual reproduction in flowering plant, angiosperm. Flower, a fascinating organ of angiosperm. Human beings have an intimate relationship with flowers since time immemorial. Flowers are objects of aesthetic, ornamental, social, religious, and cultural value. They have always been used as a symbol for conveying important human feelings, such as love, affections, happiness, grief, mourning, etc. Let us list at least five flowers of ornamental values that are commonly cultivated at gardens and in homes. Find out the names of five more flowers that are used in social and cultural celebration in your house, in your family. Have you heard of floriculture? What does it refer? Floriculture is the culture of flowers. To a biologist, flowers are morphological and embryological marvels, and at the site of sexual reproduction in class 11, you have read the various parts of a flower. Figure 2.1 will help you recall the parts of a typical flower. Can you name the two parts in a flower in which the two most important units of sexual reproduction develop? It is angiosperm, it is androecium and gynoecium. Pre-fertilizing structures and event. Much before the actual flower is seen on a plant, the decision that the plant is going to be flower has been taken place. Several hormonal and structural changes are initiated, which led to the development, differentiation, and further development of the floral primordium. Inflorescence of different form which bears the floral buds, and then the flower. In the flower the male and the female reproductive structures, the androecium and the gynoecium, differentiate and develop. You would recollect that the androecium consists of a whole of stamen representing the male reproductive organs, and the gynoecium represents the female reproductive organs. Stamen, macrosporangium, and pollen grain. Figure 2.2a shows the two parts of a typical stamen, the long and the slender stalk called the filament, the terminal bilobed structures called the anther. The proximal is attached to the thalamus, the petal or the petal of the flower. The number and the length of stamen are variable in flowers in different species. If you were to collect a stamen each from 10 flowers, and arrange them on a slide, you would be able to appreciate the large variation in size seen in nature. Careful observation of each stamen under a dissecting microscope and making neat, clean diagram with would elucidate the range in shape and arrangement of anther in different flower. A typical angiosperm anther is bilobed. Each lobe is have two theca. That means they are diathecous. Often a longitudinal groove runs lengthwise separating the theca. This is longitudinal groove. This is longitudinal groove. The theca. Let us now understand the organization of this in transverse section. The bilobed nature of the anther is very distinct in the transverse section of the anther. The anther is four-sided. The anther is four-sided structure consisting of macrosporangia located at each corners, which has two lobes. The microsporangia develop further and become pollen sacs. They extend longitudinally all through the length of the anther and are packed with pollen grains. Structure of microsporangium. In the transverse section, a typical microsporangium appears near circular in outline. It is generally surrounded by four walls: the epidermis, endothecium, middle layer, and the tapetum. The outer three walls performs the function of protection. These three performs the function. These three function as protection and help in dehiscence of anther to release the pollen. The innermost wall is the tapetum, which nourishes the developing pollen grain. Cell of the tapetum possess dense cytoplasm and generally have more than one nucleus. Can you think how tapetal cell would become binucleate? When the anther is young, a group of compactly arranged hom- homogeneous cells called the sporogenous tissues occupy the center of each microsporangium. Homogeneous cells known as sporogenous tissue. Microsporangiasis. Microsporangiasis. As the anther develops, the cell of the sporangiasis tissues undergo mutic division and forms the microspore tetrad. What would be the polarity of the cell of the tetrad? It must be N. This is the structures of the anther. This is known as epidermis. This is known as endothecium. These are middle layers, and the inner is known as this inner is known as tapetum, and this is pollen mother cell. These are pollen grains. As each cell of the sporangious tissues is capable of giving rise to a microspore tetrad, each one is a potential pollen or microspore mother cell. The process of formation of microspore from the pollen mother cells to meiosis is known as microsporangiasis. The microspores, as they are formed, are arranged in a cluster of four cells, which is known as microspore tetrads. As anther mature and dehydrate, the microspore dissociate from each other and develop into pollen grain. Inside each microsporangium, several thousand of microspores or pollen grains are formed that are released with dehiscence of anther. Pollen grain. The pollen grain represents the male gametophyte. If you touch the opened anther of hibiscus or any other flower, you would find deposition of yellowish powdery pollen grain on your finger. Sprinkle these grains on a drop of butter on a glass slide and observe under a microscope. You will really be amazed at the variety of architecture, shape, size, and the design color seen in the pollen grain for different species. Pollen grains are generally spherical, measuring about 25 to 50 micrometer in diameter. It has prominent two-layered ball. The outer hard layer is known as exine and which is made up of sporopollen, which is one of the most resistant organic material known. It can withstand very high temperature and a strong acid and alkali. No enzyme that degrade the sporopollen. You can think it as the strongest chemical in a plant. It's so far known. Pollen grain exine has prominent aperture known as germ pore, where sporopollen is absent. Pollen grains are well preserved as fossils because of the presence of sporopollen. The exine exhibits a fascinating array of patterns and designs. Why do you think the exine should be hard? What is the function of jumpo? The inner wall of the pollen grain is called intine. Its thin, continuous layer made up of cellulose and pectin. The cytoplasm of pollen grain is surrounded by plasma membrane. When the pollen grain is mature, it contains two cells. It contains two cells, the vegetative one and the generative cell. The vegetative cell is bigger, has abundant food reserve, and a largely irregularly shaped nucleus. The generative cell is small and floats in the cytoplasm of the vegetative cell. It is spindle shaped with dense cytoplasm and nucleus. In over 60% of angiosperm, pollen grains are shed at this two stage. In the remaining species, the generative cell divide mitotically to give rise to the two male gametes before pollen grains are shed. Three-celled structure. Pollen grains of many species cause severe allergies and bronchial affections in some people who often leading to chronic respiratory disorder like asthma and bronchitis. It may be mentioned that Parthenium or carrot grass that came into India as a contaminant with important wheat has become ubiquitous in occurrence and pollen allergy. Pollen grains are rich in nutrients. It has become a fashion in recent years to be used as pollen tablets as food supplements. In Western countries, a large number of pollen products in the form of tablets and syrups are available in the market. Pollen consumption have been claimed to increase the performance of athletes and the race horses. When once they are said pollen grains have to land on the stigma before they lose the viability if they have to bring about fertilization. How long do you think the pollen grain retain viability? The period for which the pollen grain retain viable is highly variable and to some extent depends on the prevailing temperature and humidity. In some cereals such as rice and wheat, pollen grain lose viability within 30 minutes of their release.